Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Friday, September 10th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Civil disobedience, impeachment. Republicans tonight threatening both in the wake of President Biden's sweeping new federal vaccine mandate that would force some 100 million people to get vaccinated or risk their jobs. As for reaction here at home, KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman has that story.
Can I get you to run some wings, please? We're balancing the needs of our employees with the needs that the government now has.
At Woodstock's Pizza, co-owner Laura Ambrose is working with her team to determine how the federal vaccination requirement or regular testing for unvaccinated employees will impact them.
For us, the challenge is that we are desperately trying to hire enough team members for all of our restaurants.
Woodstock's has 8 locations with more than 400 employees. Ambrose says they are encouraging vaccinations and more than 75% of staff have already gotten them. But that means if the order went into effect right now, about 100 employees would need to do weekly COVID testing.
We'll have to decide how we're going to handle the requirement that we have to test those employees, and I'm sure that that will be required because we're not intending to let go of people that are part of our team now.
Woodstock's HR manager, Jarrell Tolentino, says they are implementing the requirements but still have some questions.
What do we have to do in terms of what do we collect? Can we do self-attestment verbal? Can we do self-attestment e-signatures? Do we have to do anything in general specifically? And then where do we house it? And how do we house it? And just making sure that we are very, very compliant.
President Biden says the vaccination and testing requirement applies to businesses with 100 or more employees, and those employers must give paid time for workers to get vaccinated.
We want to make sure that employers aren't going to be spending an enormous amount of money, especially during a pandemic where they've been hurting.
Jerry Sanders is CEO of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, which represents more than 2,500 businesses.
I think that there's a frustration that people can get vaccinated, it's safe, it's effective, and they're not doing it, and it's starting to affect a lot of others. So, I think it was a reasonable choice.
Sanders is hoping that companies won't have to bear the testing costs for unvaccinated employees, that it should be the worker or government's responsibility. He says until the requirement goes into effect, we won't know what the impact will be on an already strained labor force.
Some employees may leave, but some employees may decide it's reasonable to get vaccinated now. So, I think we won't know that trend until it really rolls out.
The new requirements will come down from the Department of Labor and OSHA, expecting to impact more than 80 million workers. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
As for Republicans threatening legal or other actions over the mandate, President Biden does not seem to be too worried about it. In fact, today he blasted GOP governors who issued statewide bans on mask and vaccine mandates.
Particularly some Republican governors have been so cavalier with the health of these kids, so cavalier with the health of their communities. We're playing for real here. This isn't a game.
The Republican National Committee is calling for a halt to the mandates or says it will file a lawsuit. Again, the president's new pandemic policies include vaccine or testing mandates for business, federal workers, and teachers under federal authority. San Diego Unified, the county's largest school district, has wrapped up its first 2 weeks of school. School Board President Richard Barrera says 172 students and 28 staff members have tested positive for COVID-19. There was also an outbreak at Mira Mesa High School. The football team had more than 3 positive tests, so football activities were canceled. The team's coach, who was battling cancer, died after testing positive for the virus. Still, Barrera says he believes the district's safety protocols are working. The district has been able to identify cases and use contact tracing to determine those who may have been exposed.
I think the strategies that we have in place are the right strategies, the effective strategies. But we continue to be challenged by the reality that all of us are facing, which is the continued surge of COVID with the surge of the Delta variant.
Students are required to wear masks both indoors and outdoors. There are more hand washing stations and upgraded ventilation systems. Barrera says the district is still discussing whether to follow Los Angeles Unified in making COVID vaccines mandatory for students aged 12 and older. Disruptions continue at school board meetings over the masking mandates. As KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne shows us, Poway's meeting never started due to protesters forcing their way inside the district office.
Poway's school board meeting last night had a full agenda of items to address, but they all went unaddressed because the meeting was delayed and later adjourned. Protesters rallied outside the district offices before the meeting. Gabriela Dow is a Poway Unified School District parent. She stopped at the district office to drop off a written comment because she missed the deadline to submit.
We walked over and saw that there was nobody left outside, and I saw some of the district staff. I went up and asked them, so is public comment now allowed in person?
Public comments could be made through Zoom only.
The district staff just looked kind of stunned and said, no, these people just rushed in, and we've told them they're not allowed to be here, and they refused to leave. And, police are going to come because they won't leave.
After the delay, school board members returned to the live streamed meeting only to adjourn.
We asked the protesters to leave, and they refused. This meeting was posted as a closed meeting, and they are trespassing. We have been advised by law enforcement to adjourn this meeting at 7:11.
Sharon McKeeman, the leader of the Let Them Breathe group, says the organization only provides signage resources for rallies. She says parents can then gather to express their own point of view.
If meetings are being held virtually and they're not open to the public, then Let Them Breathe would never encourage parents to enter those meetings.
Dow says the protesters had various signs, but none were related to items on the agenda.
People were holding signs saying ethnic studies or racism and terrorism. That's a whole other, situation. Political signs, Larry Elder. And so there seemed to be a lot of different topics that this group was all protesting together and disrupted the meeting.
A new date for Poway School Board meeting has not been announced. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
The Grossmont Union High School District has hired an independent investigator to look into an incident at Valhalla High. A viral video allegedly shows a white campus supervisor using a knee to the neck to restrain a black student involved in a fight on August 31st. The campus supervisor has been placed on administrative leave. Grossmont Union's superintendent said the district will take appropriate action once they have the results of the investigator's review. The events of 9/11 inspired many men and women to pursue careers in public safety. Southwestern College has been training future firefighters, police officers, and paramedics for more than 30 years. KPBS education reporter MG Perez takes us to the grand opening of the college's new $29 million training center.
It's a firefighter's tradition. Today, it honors the fallen heroes of 9/11. But with sorrow, there is space for celebration, too. Southwestern College officially opened its new $29 million public safety training center this afternoon. Chelsea Lansing is a paramedic student who just started the rigorous 14-month education program. She was a child in 2001 when terror attacked America.
Being 8 years old when this happened, and to now be a part of the first responders, to be a part of this community, to be a part of this family, it hits a little bit different.
Only 24 students a year are accepted into the Southwestern College paramedic program. They are taught how to help a patient who stopped breathing, how to give correct medications, and perform CPR. Whatever it takes to save lives. The school also trains firefighters and police officers.
People deserve to be cared for, but they also deserve to be cared about And I think that being a paramedic, it kind of covers all of those fields.
This new facility complements an already stellar program. Last year, as the pandemic proceeded, Southwestern Emergency Service students returned to in-person learning within 6 weeks of the shutdown. More than 95% of them graduated the program, and all of them now have jobs. In fact, the college says it has a 100% rate of job placement for students who complete all of their requirements. That's a guarantee these are some of the future heroes, inspired by those who paid the ultimate price for their service.
I know that all of our hearts are in the right places for those who are in the paramedic program. I know that we would all be helping out if something like that were to happen.
Words to remember on this day of somber celebration. MG Perez, KPBS News.
As gubernatorial candidates make a last push to secure votes, the county's registrar is reminding voters about their voting options this election. KPBS reporter Alexandra Valhalla has more on what you need to know.
More than 200 voting locations are opening up Saturday for California's recall election. Cynthia Paz, the interim registrar of voters for San Diego, says they're expecting a 70% voter turnout.
It's been steady. Right now we're at over 700,000 mail ballots returned to our office.
Voters no longer have an assigned location and can visit any of the voting locations in the county. Starting Saturday through Monday, locations throughout the county will be open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And on Election Day Tuesday, those times will be extended, with polls opening up from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Any mail ballots that are postmarked on or before Election Day and received up to 7 days after Election Day through the mail, those are timely cast and will be counted.
Paz recommends dropping off your mail-in ballot at any of the drop-off locations or voting stations in the county. Some candidates are still hoping to gain some votes, like Larry Elder, who made a stop in Vista Friday morning. He talked about vaccine mandates and says it should be a matter of choice. He wasn't the only one making the rounds in San Diego. John Cox made a stop in Shelter Island to talk about what he calls a broken state. Meanwhile, up north in Sacramento, Governor Gavin Newsom cast his vote in the recall election. To learn more where you can cast your ballot, you can visit sdvote.com. Alexandra Rangel, KPBS News.
Much of the U.S. experienced record warm temperatures this summer. California was one of the 5 states that reported their warmest summer ever. As KPBS reporter Melissa May found out, last night's thunder and lightning storm suggests hot temperatures could continue through the end of the year.
If you looked outside your window last night, you probably saw and heard something like this.
The monsoon high is big. It pushes moisture in from Arizona and it collides with moisture from off the coast. So yeah, this is a pattern where you're more likely to have lightning even at night in Southern California.
Ivory Small is a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration meteorologist and says storms like the one last night are the result of a larger than normal high pressure system over the west.
When that happened, it didn't want to move, so temperatures pretty much everywhere were above normal, and here in California, some places have not been this hot before.
This year has already played out as a dangerous fire season, and Small says fire risk through the fall will keep on being higher than normal.
It should be even warmer than normal during the fall time period and drier than normal. And both of those are bad when you look at the fire situation.
Temperature patterns are predicted to be hotter and drier than normal through the end of the year. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Dry weather in the days to come. We've had some of the shower and thunderstorm activity over the past few days. It's gone, and we stay pretty hot as Olaf, our other potential for moisture from the Pacific, doesn't bring any changes for us. There are heat advisories still in place here throughout parts of the region as we watch for those temperatures to stay a bit above normal for this time of year. Farther to the south, we're watching Olaf. We've seen it make that curve out towards the Pacific, and it's going to keep on going over the next few days, which means we will not be getting any rain from it either. I know sometimes we could use the rain, but we won't see it as we head through tonight. 70, 71 for the low, and as you look towards Oceanside, 65. Meanwhile, venturing into Borrego Springs, upper 70s. Now, across the Southwest this weekend, there's some moisture to be had. Spotty showers and thunderstorms through Utah and Colorado. That's more associated with a very big change in the pattern for the Northwest. We miss out on it, though. We don't see anything. We're going to keep things dry and quiet. So as we venture through tomorrow, 84 the high, clouds giving way to sunshine. Chula Vista holding on to the mid-80s too. And as you head towards Borrego Springs, 105 for that forecasted high. It is going to be a little uncomfortable. Escondido in the lower 90s. We still have the heat. That doesn't go anywhere as we venture through the end of the weekend and really into the start of next work week. It's going to stay pretty quiet, pretty dry across not just the Southwest, but the entire West. When do our temperatures cool down? Hopefully as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. You can see here for the coast, there is a trail off gradually throughout the week, starting in the mid-80s as we go through Saturday and then getting better for Sunday, Monday, even better for Tuesday and Wednesday. For inland locations, we'll be in the 90s through the weekend, trailing off towards the mid-80s for Tuesday and Wednesday. Remaining pretty warm out there with some clouds, and mountain locations will have some of those clouds for Saturday and Sunday. Pretty limited though, and again, not expecting any chances of rain. Will stay dry into the rest of next work week. Desert locations, triple digits for you. And again, staying sunny, hot, and dry. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
Tomorrow marks 20 years since the September 11th attacks, and for many people in New York City, the emotions of that day are still raw.
20 years later, but we still feel it so intensely, and this wound will never entirely heal.
Today, people have been visiting the 9/11 Memorial, where the Twin Towers once stood, paying their respects. Tomorrow, presidents, leaders, and families of victims will be gathering at One World Trade Center to honor the lives that were lost. 9/11 launched two wars, spawned intense fear of foreign terrorism, and unified Americans against a common foe. KPBS's Amitha Sharma explores the collective trauma of that day and how it might inform this moment in our history. And a warning to viewers, this story contains disturbing content.
First came clues that horror was on its march that September 11th morning 20 years ago.
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed and our 5 has been staffed.
Then disbelief and shock as the first World Trade Center tower was hit by a plane hijacked by Al-Qaeda terrorists. When the scope of the attack came into view, there was sadness, anger, and a warning by then President George W. Bush that America was ready for retribution.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice.
I think the thing that left America so shaken and left me so shaken about 9/11 was not just this horrendous loss of life that we all watched live on TV, but where it happened, right? It happened on American soil.
UC San Diego political science professor Thad Kauser says the collective trauma bonded the country. It brought people across political divides together. In many ways, he says our collective response to that day showed our resilience.
Americans felt more united and more like citizens of a country that had, sure, brought together by this shared trauma.
But that sense of collective action, of all in it togetherness, has been elusive during this pandemic. Even though COVID has killed more than 650,000 Americans, and even though the pandemic has been a much more collective experience with school and work closures and people getting sick and dying.
If you look just purely at the numbers, right, we had more people die during many single days of the winter surge than died in all of the September 11th attacks combined.
Kauser says the contrast in reaction exposes a difference between who we were then and who we are now.
That's crazy!
He says we're in an era of hyper-political polarization.
This is an era of political warfare that leaves America more starkly divided than any era we've seen before. It almost makes it impossible to imagine that we could come together in the way that we did as a nation after 9/11.
UC Irvine psychologist Roxanne Cohen-Silver says another reason 9/11 unified Americans is because the threat was foreign.
Those bad people did something to us. Now it's that we're all we're all perpetrators of the infection.
America is fractured today, even though the threat is far bigger. Another reason, says Silver, is because we've lived through trauma after trauma after trauma over the last 20 years. The mass shootings, climate-driven weather catastrophes, the political scandals of former President Donald Trump's administration, the killing of George Floyd, the January 6th insurrection, and of course, the pandemic. She says at some level, people are exhausted.
People do become numb to the numbers, but I don't think we became numb to the tragedy.
The cascade of tragedies has changed how we view 9/11 today, says Kauser.
It may be easy to look back and say, really, that puny event? But on the other hand, 9/11 wasn't just one day, right? It set in place a series of things. The war in Afghanistan, our longest war, the war in Iraq.
He says as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the country might take a lesson from the unity back then, however brief, to navigate its current divide.
It's an opportunity to remember why everyone made those sacrifices, what brought people together at that time, and think about whether some of the things that we're facing today, whether these are our traumas on that scale, and whether we can get over some of the differences in how we want to lead our daily lives, whether we want to wear a mask, all of those things, get through that back to that renewed sense of joint purpose.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
And that's just one of several special reports from KPBS News this week leading up to the 20th anniversary of 9/11. You can find all of our content online at kpbs.org. The push to secure more water in California may hurt the state's ability to meet greenhouse gas reduction goals. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson breaks down the findings of a new study.
A new study from the nonpartisan group Next 10 and the Pacific Institute finds the state's drive for drinkable water may actually be increasing greenhouse gas emissions in the future. The study examined the connection between water use and power.
It takes a tremendous amount of energy, it turns out, to collect, to produce, to treat, to distribute, and to use the water that we use.
Droughts fed by climate change will likely increase local pressure to tap into new water resources. But two San Diego strategies, desalination and treatment of used water, both carry high energy price tags. Reducing the demand for water is key.
Water conservation and efficiency can help us meet not only our water goals, but our energy and our climate goals. And there are many things that we can be doing in our homes, in our businesses, and in agriculture to help advance efficiency.
Cooley says conservation has helped keep water demand from growing, even as the state's population has gotten bigger. She says cutting outdoor water use is also important.
We spend a tremendous amount of water irrigating our landscapes, in many cases irrigating very water-intensive lawns, for example. We have tremendous opportunities now to be moving away from lawn and putting in low water use plants.
The report also recommends using renewable power to ease the climate impact of using energy to generate or move water. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
If you work for a large employer, refusing to get vaccinated might soon cost you your job. SDSU's Miro Kopik explains what's coming to businesses across San Diego in the Friday Business Report.
This is a huge move by the Biden administration. It's taking the full force of the federal government and applying it throughout all the economy as much as they can leverage that. It's really, as Biden talked about yesterday, really a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and it's really trying to get that vaccination rate in the United States to over 75 to 80%. And so the fine for every case is $14,000. So it's certainly catching every employer's attention. However, it can be frightening to businesses because yesterday there were no details beyond what was announced. How is this going to be implemented? When is it going to start? How's the enforcement period going to work? If a company has to provide testing capabilities in order to be compliant, where are the tests coming from? Where can the employees get a test? This is going to have very specific rules, very specific start dates, but those are going to start being released in about a week.
Theme park attendance is picking up, and locations like Disneyland, SeaWorld, and Legoland are adding attractions that are both fun and cultural. Disneyland Resort is kicking off its fall favorites return, featuring Halloween time fun at both parks. There's also cultural and celebratory events like Plaza de la Familia, honoring the everlasting bonds of family. The park, which employs thousands, is also continuing to step up its COVID requirements.
You'll see our character friends over here social distancing. That is what you will see when you come into the park. We are keeping our character friends safe as well as our guests. So right now guests are able to, and cast members, walk around outside without a mask. But if they're inside, regardless of vaccination status, they will be required to wear a mask unless they're actively eating or drinking. And it's just, it feels nice knowing that the company is being safe. We are enforcing it, but most of the time you don't even have to, because guests want to be here, cast members are happy to be here, so you just feel very welcomed and everybody's doing the right things.
The fall special events run through November 2nd. Special offers include tickets as low as $83 a day per person. Next week, we will take a look at attractions coming to Legoland. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.